I want you to pretend that it's Valentine's Day because this was supposed to be out Valentine's Day because it's a romance story, but I couldn't find my SD card and I was looking for it everywhere, and like my life is upside down in the past few months, and it's like I don't know where I put my underwear on a given day. And then like I find out that I can't just use any SD card. It has to be SDXC, which is like special. And so it was like $30, but now it's not $30 anymore. And so I'm like, what about the tariffs? And like, I just, hi, today we're going to be talking about Miss Demeanor by Elinor Lipman. I had never read anything by Elinor Lipman before, but apparently she was a big deal that a couple of her stories became movies, like Then She Found Me, which was her first novel, which starred Helen Hunt and Bette Midler and Colin Firth. I didn't know any of that. I didn't pay attention. What drew me in was the synopsis, which is this lawyer, Jane Morgan, has sex with someone on top of her apartment in New York City. It's a fancy apartment complex in New York City, and she has sex with someone late at night up on the roof, and then an old lady across the street sees it and then calls the cops on her, and then Jane is under house arrest and is now stuck to her apartment complex, and she's basically trying to figure out what to do with her time. And the romance aspect comes into play when she meets someone else, this other guy who also is under house arrest for another issue entirely. And so she gets friendly with him, and then the story evolves from there. What I like about this book is you really feel the New Yorker aspect in this, for better or for worse. That might annoy some people. Like, you read this and you can feel how, I guess, 1%y it feels. Some people might read this and be like, these are fucking white people problems. Um, but that doesn't mean it's any less entertaining. You get a real feel for all the people she knows in the building, and she has a real drive for curiosity to, like, do something with her time and, try to figure out her life. Especially since she has a twin sister who looks exactly like her, and apparently her identical twin sister does better than her in some aspects, and so she's trying to wrestle with that. It's one of the few instances in which I'm like, oh, I actually like this identical twin sister subplot, because most of the time when there's an identical twin sibling, it's like, oh, are you fucking for real? I'm looking at you, Final Fantasy 12. One thing I found about the prose is that it felt like it was going too fast at times. Imagine you're listening to this New Yorker woman being, telling her whole story, and you're just like, oh, okay, yeah, oh, what? And then, she just keeps going, and then like, there's some instances in which it's like you kind of have to read between the lines, and it's like, okay, and then the next chapter, and then you're like, oh, okay, that was fast, and then you just have to like go back and be like, oh, that's what you meant, okay, oh yeah, yeah, now I understand. Which didn't happen too many times, but it happened enough that I noticed it. It didn't ruin my reading experience. I still enjoyed it. One thing I do want to touch upon, and this is like food for a whole nother video, like maybe even on my other channel or something, because this spans to not just romance in literature, but romance in movies and TV, video games, whatever. In your typical like Hollywood-esque, American-made romance, it's obviously going to center around two white, typically American leads. And the thing I've noticed, the two white American leads are like really awkward about sex, and they fumble with it. And it's not just about trying to make an interesting romantic, rom-com kind of story. It's also kind of saying something about us in general as a society, because they also incorporate characters from other places, and they are typically depicted as being more skillful in the ways of sex and romance. You have like your Europeans, you have your Hispanics, you have the black community. Just to give you one random example, because I a few months ago watched for the first time You've Got Mail, and Dave Chappelle is in it, which I was like, this is weird seeing Dave Chappelle in it. But Dave Chappelle is Tom Hanks' best friend, and I'm like, oh, I see the trope here. It's the black best friend. But not only that, it's this idea that people of color seem to have more skill and more ways of knowing how to handle romantic relationships. Like Dave Chappelle's character was like, "Oh man, you got to do this about your girl," that kind of attitude, and it's like, this is so 90s. Like, yeah. In here, that happens because, without spoiling things in detail, there are two antagonists, and I say antagonists slightly because it's like they're not villains. Like, don't think of them as villains. Not all antagonists are like evil. It's just they're antagonizing the main plot of the protagonist, because Jane's also trying not to get into trouble. And so, without spoiling anything, these two Polish antagonists are kind of doing something, and the way that they're depicted in one specific instance, I was like, ooh, I don't know how I feel about that, was when Jane kind of looks at them and like describes them in her head as like, oh, they're 1800s ways of like love and sex. And I was like, huh, that's very like stereotypical of us to view like Eastern, European slash Slavic communities, where it's just like, oh, they do weird shit over there. Um, and so that kind of came into my head, and I was like, I don't know how I feel about this. There's a whole conversation here about how American, attitudes towards sex is perceived as very awkward compared to all the other cultures out there, whether it's, people of color or European. And for the most part, this is all true. Yes, America has a huge problem with sex and romance. It's been like that since the Puritans came. Even though you, if you're an American watching this, have nothing to do with Puritanism right now, the fact that you were born here or grew up here, you've been raised in this whole society that has been echoing from Puritanism, where it's like, yeah, we are way more shy about sex. Not everyone in the world is like that. But also, I feel like this attitude of like, oh, the foreigners know more about sex than we do, kind of falls into a danger of like fetishizing them. And also, it kind of absolves everyone else of like their own problems. Because, yeah, they aren't as afraid about sex as we are, but they also have their own issues. Everyone around the world has their own unique issues with sex and romance. So I feel like it would be a refreshing of fresh air, breath of fresh air. So I just feel like it would be a breath of fresh air if some of these romance stories also depicted these best friend type characters who are of other cultural backgrounds to be as clueless as the main character, the white American main character, about the relationship at hand. Or, be like, I don't know, man, I'm not any better at this than you are. But also, going back to the antagonism that I touched upon. So, the two Polish antagonists, there's again, I'm trying not to spoil it, but the reason they're doing a certain thing, they're trying to do a certain thing, and it's like, oh, this feels kind of anti-immigration, doesn't it? Which is like, I don't know, how old is Lipman? I was starting to feel certain boomer undertones of like, the immigrants, they're messing around stuff. And that part I was like, eh. This isn't to say that it's a problem to have antagonists who are ethnic. You can have an ethnic antagonist. You can have an ethnic villain. You can have a villain based on any ethnicity. I think the problem is the context in which what drives their villainy or antagonism. And I feel like this was kind of leaning towards like immigration, but it didn't seep into it so fully that it was like ruining anything. It's just like, it's an awkward situation. Take that's another, that's the whole can of worms that I just opened, and that's like, yeah, this. Another thing I want to touch upon is that, when I was reading this, I had obviously never read anything by Lipman before, so I was like, oh, I wonder how she's going to describe the sex. But she doesn't, because it's like, they go into a bedroom and then it crossfades into the next chapter. And so I was like, oh, that's a cop out. And so I was thinking the other day about like how, a lot of people would consider this smut and people would consider this literature. And I was just like thinking, I was like, is the only difference really because this gets penisy? but this doesn't. Like, is that it really? I mean, there are other, with this specific instance, this was based on some fan fiction that the author originally wrote, and then kind of made her own thing. So like, yeah, you can feel kind of like the tropey elements hardcore in here. But that doesn't mean there aren't any tropey elements in here too. Like, they both have tropes that kind of make people roll their eyes, or like, okay, yeah, I know that trope, whatever. And again, some people might be more entertained and get something more out of this than in this. There's some people that I could see not wanting to read this because it's like, some New Yorker in like a rich, fancy apartment. Like, what problems can you possibly have? Well, this is about, college grad students, whatever, trying to like please their teacher and getting into chaos and not, having a handle on their life. Like, that's relatable to a lot of people these days. So I feel like it's kind of, what's the word? Disingenuous. I don't know. I'm just throwing words around, to kind of say this one's better than this one, or this one's better. You know what I mean? That kind of like really uppity, like, oh, well, this is real literature because she does not describe the head of the penis, and that is appropriate for literature. Fuck shit like that. Yeah, it was good. I liked it. It's witty. It's funny. It feels like you're drinking champagne on a New York rooftop when you read this. Happy Valentine's Day in May. So, yeah. I'm not wearing any pants. Oh, you know what I remember? I actually was drawn to this book because it says misdemeanor, and I had an idea for like a female vigilante who's called like misdemeanor, because I was like, oh, that's a good pun, misdemeanor, but she's misdemeanor. Like, that's amazing. And then I saw that it was already a thing, and I was like, oh, fuck you.